light the night skyline to usher in 2017.
The elections will be free, fair, and transparent.
Timely reassurance as President vows to deal decisively with troublemakers. Shock and disbelief as peasant farmer turns instant millionaire with 100 million shillings win.
The bank even prepared me for that, telling me that I have only 3 months to live, back 2007.
14 surgeries, 3 kidney transplants, but no success. Gitau's story of pain and hope. And on Checkpoint tonight, you don't want to miss my conversation with Attorney General Professor Githu Muigai. We'll be taking a look at the year in perspective 2016 and what to look forward to in this year, that is 2017. This is Checkpoint, and it starts right now. A very warm welcome to the very first episode of Checkpoint, this first day of January 2017. I hope you have had a good start to the festivities and a good start to this year. This is the first of many episodes this year, and we do hope you will join us not just today, but for many more Sundays to come. My name is Yvonne Okwara Matole, and our sign language interpreter is Meresha Owiti. We start off, of course, with the fact that Kenyans joined the rest of the world to usher in 2017 in style, with many calling for peaceful campaigns as the country enters an election year. This as President Uhuru Kenyatta asked politicians to conduct themselves peacefully and avoid inciting Kenyans to violence. Nick Wambua starts our bulletin with how the first day of 2017 was ushered in.
It was all color around the world as different countries ushered in the new year. Kenya was not to be left behind in the celebrations to usher in 2017. Thousands of Kenyans, including Deputy President William Ruto and other leaders, flocked Eldoret town to attend the Pamoja concert. And when the clock ticked midnight, the crowd went ecstatic. With leaders here carrying special messages for Kenyans.
Na Mungu ametupatia nafasi kama wa Kenya so that we can enjoy 2017. All of us who are here.
Christian faithfuls in various churches in the city opted to go to their churches to welcome the new year with prayers and song. Social places too were jammed with travelers waiting for the clock to strike midnight.
Hii mwaka naona nikaa itakuwa poa. Sio nikaa itakuwa mbaya ka last year.
Security was tight in most social places, including churches. President Kenyatta, who spent his Christmas holidays at the coast, gave his address to the nation, with the focus being on elections, scheduled for August this year. The president warned that those out to cause chaos will be met with full force of the law.
The elections will be free, fair, and transparent. We expect all contestants to accept the results and play their role in building a Kenya of the future.
Sentiments echoed by his deputy president, who addressed the thousands of people who had attended the Pamoja concert in Eldoret.
As we go into 2017, we must remind ourselves that we have one home for 40 million Kenyans, a home called Kenya.
And And early today, Kenyans in Nairobi flocked Uhuru Park to celebrate the new year with their families.
Nimekuja hapa kuleta watoto na wajukuu washerehekee.
Tumepata mwaka mzuri mpya. Ndio maana tumesema hatuwezi kaa kwa nyumba, tukuja hapa tusherehekee.
Every Kenyan as well as leaders expressing hope that there will be peace during this election year 2017. Nicholas Wambua, KTN News.
Now, the new year arrived at different times worldwide, with the first being New Zealand. Everywhere, hundreds, if not thousands, gathered at key venues to usher in the new year in style. And as the countdown started, the night skyline was lit by spectacular fireworks across the globe, including Australia, Japan, South Korea, India, and others. In Dubai, thousands of people watched as fireworks shot from the sides of the world's tallest building, the Burj Khalifa. All right, let's come back home now into a crisis facing the country. The Council of Governors is accusing striking medics of making unrealistic pay demands that are difficult to implement. The chairman of the Council of Governors, Peter Munya, further says the collective bargaining agreement being pushed by the doctors was signed by the previous regime even before implementation of devolution. Munya, who was speaking during the end-year dinner organized by governors, urged doctors to return to the negotiating table.
I would want to say that part of the problem has been doctors insisting on a collective bargaining agreement that was signed before county governments came into place, and insisting that that agreement must be implemented. Yet clearly, that agreement cannot be implemented because it's an agreement that was not negotiated before the coming into place of the devolved system of government, who are the main employers of the doctors. As we close the new year, is to appeal to the doctors' union to come back to the negotiating table so that we can be able to sit down and come up with a realistic emoluments that the taxpayer can be able to pay to carry, and the doctors can also be able to feel properly compensated.
All right, so have you ever imagined beginning your new year as a millionaire? Well, Jeffrey Kongu will now begin a new life after winning 100 million shillings jackpot on the lotto draw. Cecilia Wakesho witnessed the payout to the 41-year-old father of two, who has been, up till this moment, a peasant farmer.
It was just a knock on Jeffrey Kongo's doorstep that will confirm Saturday night phone call that he had won a whopping 100 million shillings jackpot.
Thank you. Here is your check. Here is your check.
Courtesy of Lotto draw that has been ongoing on KTN and K24 TV channels.
Umecheza mara ngapi?
Kama 20 hivi.
20?
Yeah.
Na uko na 100 million?
Of course.
Ati wewe uko na party na bonus.
Thank you.
Nilifurahi sana nikamshukuru Mungu.
Nimeshukuru Mungu sana kwa ajili ya hiyo kitu, kwa sababu hata nimecelebrate. Nilikuwa na struggle ya school fees. Mimi najua nimepata kupitia huyo our brother amepita, hata na sisi tuna celebrate. Ushindi kwa kwake iko bado kwetu.
It was shock and disbelief for the 41-year-old Kongo. For him, it was a pipe dream that he could ever become an instant millionaire.
Unajua kwa sababu ya hii technology watu wamedanganywa, mtu anaambiwa umefanya hii, umekula hivi.
The young millionaire is a peasant farmer in Nyandarua and has been tending his few livestock that has been his lifeline in the past years. He is married and has 2 children. The question for this family from a humble beginning is how to spend and invest their millions.
Naondoka na yeye sasa hivi na atakuwa na sisi kwa muda wa mwezi mmoja, na baada ya hapo tutakwenda kufanya kitu inaitwa risk assessment. Tuangalie tuone ya kwamba tunaweza tukamwachilia ama tuweze tumwachilia ama tusipomwachilia, na tukiona ya kwamba kuna hatari basi tutaendelea kuwa na yeye mpaka ile siku tutaona ya kwamba basi tunaweza kumwachilia.
Upon confirming the new status of millionaires in the sleepy village, Kongo and his family threw a bash for the bewildered villagers. The millions could not have come at a better time when families are celebrating the new year. Cecilia Kesho, KTN News.
Winning 1 million is one thing. Winning 10 is another. Winning 100 million on the first day of the year, well, we wish him all the best with that. Now, let's talk about the focus on 2017 now. The High Court will, on the 9th of this month, hear a petition seeking to block President Uhuru Kenyatta from assenting to any changes made by Parliament to the Electoral Laws Amendment Act. Tonight on Spotlight 2017, our reporter Murimi Mwangi interrogates the role of courts in safeguarding the sanctity of the electoral process and the possible impact of that on the image of the Supreme Court should any presidential petition be filed there in 2017.
For the past 5 years, the Kenyan judiciary has faced a rough time from Parliament and even the executive over some constitutional decisions. A standoff which now appears to have been reignited by the ongoing debate in Parliament over changes to the electoral laws and court cases opposed to the same ahead of the 2017 polls.
Executive roles cannot be curtailed by the judiciary. Neither can judiciary become a squatter in the periphery of the legislature.
In a democracy, particularly where the Constitution itself says that we are a constitutional democracy, there is no better referee and repository of the rights and freedoms of the people than the courts. But if you look at
On 9th January, the High Court will hear an application in which the opposition coalition CORD wants President Uhuru Kenyatta blocked from assenting to any changes to the Electoral Laws Amendment Act. High Court Judge George Odunga recently came under direct attack from National Assembly Majority Leader Aden Duale, an attack which Attorney General Githu Muigai argues was uncalled for.
24th of January, when we come back, I will introduce a motion to discuss you. That is a provision. We will discuss you and we will expose you. You cannot be a member of the bench and play tribal politics.
And we are entitled to disagree. We must moderate the language we use to address judges. It is inappropriate that a judge should be the subject of political commentary.
It is also not lost on us. But as the senators finalize debate on the controversial changes to the Electoral Laws Amendment Act on Thursday, the Office of the Attorney General and lawyers representing speakers of the National Assembly and the Senate will be dusting their notes as CORD formally argues its case at the High Court on 9th January. This as it emerged that the government never consulted the Attorney General before drafting the contentious amendments.
It was wholly and exclusively a political process centered in Parliament. Indeed, the politicians themselves agreed not to make any alterations whatsoever.
The current standoff has been sparked off by Jubilee, which wants the IEBC to revert to manual voter identification and transmission of results in the event that technology fails.
in Kenya, there is established an electronic electoral system, integrated electronic electoral system. So that if you are going to talk about backup, that backup, by definition of the law, should be electronic.
We must be able to separate the difference between technical issues and political issues. Because if we handle these things together, if we politicians make technical decisions, then clearly we are likely to have a bad decision.
It cannot be business as usual, where a player in the game is the one setting the rules. Because all these amendments that we're arguing about and resisting are creations of the Jubilee regime.
Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga was almost denied the chance of voting when his name was not found in the Langata constituency electoral commission register. But Mr. Speaker, there was a backup. The then electoral commission had a backup which was called the Black Book backup, which had the name of the former Prime Minister. And in the process, Mr. Speaker, he was allowed to vote.
But as the electoral debate and the court battles proceed, analysts argue that court decisions relating to the 2017 polls at the High Court and the Court of Appeal will have a great impact on the credibility of the judiciary, and by extension, the Supreme Court, ahead of the August 8th general election.
People are very excited about the Supreme Court, and it just took one case, the presidential petition that was filed in 2013, to create a position where people began to ask questions about the independence of the Supreme Court.
As the judiciary continues fighting for its independence, the friction between the courts and the political class will be a key development to watch, as it will have a great impact on the public perception regarding the Supreme Court as the 2017 elections approach. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News in Nairobi.
And a reminder that tonight on Checkpoint, my conversation with Professor Githu Muigai, who's Kenya's Attorney General, on a wide range of issues that face the country in the year 2016 and what to look forward to in the year 2017. That is coming up in just a short while on social media this morning or this evening. We have asked you whether you think the AG Githu Muigai has steered the government effectively in legal matters in 2016. Do you think he steered the government effectively in legal matters in the year 2016? Send us your thoughts at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara. The hashtag is Checkpoint. That conversation is coming up in just a few minutes. Now, you may have heard of kidney transplants, but now imagine having to undergo 3 transplants in 3 consecutive years, and what's more, that all 3 operations fail. That is the story of Emmanuel Gitau, he was given 3 months to live by doctors way back in the year 2007. Emmanuel has since survived 14 major surgeries and has been undergoing dialysis for close to 1.5 decades. Here now is Rita Tinina with that story of faith, pain, hope, and perseverance. A story of life without kidneys.
In Mugumo, Kiambu County, 34-year-old Emmanuel Gitau checks on the vegetables in his kitchen garden. It may be a small garden, but Gitau lacks the energy to do much more. It's been just over 12 hours since he underwent dialysis, a procedure that has become part of his life. It all started in the year 2002 when he developed renal complications and had to undergo an emergency dialysis. But it did not solve the problem, and after several other complications, he was diagnosed with terminal renal failure. The condition with his kidneys was irreversible. He started undergoing dialysis, and in the year 2005, his family opted for what is seen as a way out of dialysis, a kidney transplant.
My dad was the first donor, and after being given it worked, but for only 3 hours. At that time I was in ICU, and I had high-grade fever, which eventually, after trying to resuscitate it, the kidney, they said one of the veins burst inside. and they had to remove it. It was even rotting.
A year later, his brother donated one of his kidneys. Gitau had better luck the second time round.
At least it gave me service for 7 months, and I came back to Kenya, stayed for the 7 months. Again, it failed. I had to go back to India. They tried resuscitating it like twice, going and coming back, but eventually it failed again and they had to remove it.
The family did not give up. In 2007, his sister gave up one of her kidneys. It failed after 1 month. Doctors gave up on Gitau.
After that, they even prepared me for death, telling me that I have only 3 months to live, back 2007. But I thank God because I told them it's only God who knows my fate.
9 years down the line, he is still alive, living on faith and hope.
We just let God be God in everything. You do your part. Then the rest, if it happens, if you become sick, God knows it. Ours is to keep faith. You tell God, yes, we believe you're a healer, but everything has a reason. So at the end of the day, we'll be at peace and we'll get the grace to persevere.
Gitau undergoes dialysis twice weekly. Every session costs 12,000 shillings. In a month, he spends 96,000 shillings. In a year, over 1.1 million shillings. In that journey, he says, God, his parents, his family and friends have seen him through.
Every challenge you're given, God gives a solution. And the first solution is that he has given me very great parents, siblings, very caring.
His father, who donated a kidney in 2005, died in 2015 after his remaining kidney failed. Gitau, who has made 5 trips to India for treatment, was not always this way.
I was tall. I didn't have this hunchback. I was very active. I used to play basketball, football, swimming was my best.
Here, he is with his parents and a group of friends in India during his first transplant. He is the tallest. As a teenager, he was your typical teenager. As a young boy, he stood out. Now, he can't do most of the things he was able to, such as walk for a distance, sit or sleep for long hours, or some of the things that to many come naturally.
I don't pass any urine. For the last 14 years, I have not been passing any urine. I pay to urinate.
A caterer by profession, he cannot do much in the kitchen, but with the help of his staff, he has a small business making snacks such as crisps.
It doesn't mean that I am sick. I'll have to sit down and I just become a parasite initially. Small effort and God does the rest.
Robbed of his youth by his condition, Gitau illustrates the story of his life in his book, Life Without Kidneys.
It has always been my desire to tell people more about God. You know what God has done to me, my experiences, despite all. And the main reason I really wanted to do this is people to let God be God.
Despite his strong spirit, he has faced ridicule.
There were some guys who were laughing, saying that I look like a pig. They were saying in vernacular, I look like a pig. Laughing, saying that I look like I'll die tomorrow. But well, yes, I look funny. That even when I'm laughing, people, they're like, ay, ujamana kaj.
Every Sunday, he visits churches to offer messages of encouragement. He also advocates for a healthy lifestyle.
Wasinione huruma, to feel pity on themselves, because, it can happen to you. Everyone is a candidate to that, considering that lifestyle, unhealthy lifestyle is what is dominating nowadays. People are not even bothered of good health,
14 years of dialysis, 14 major operations and living without kidneys. Gitau's is a journey of determination, a life living on faith and hope to see another day. Rita Tinina, KTN News.
A true inspiration there, 14 years And he's seen yet another year in 2017. I hope that gives you some inspiration on this very first day of the year. Now, cultivation of talents is a sphere that the Kenyan system of education is criticized for not paying attention to. The reality is, and has always been, that not every individual is academically gifted. This does not mean that these students do not have any other gifts and talents. Carol Derry tells us of the story of a 30-year-old Benson miner who's gifted in the arts.
You can have a own message you would want, you can have a Bible verse.
The concentration is visibly etched on his face as he meticulously shapes his art pieces. He dreams, lives, and breathes art, he says. 30-year-old Benson Maina is a financial consultant based in Nyeri town. His background is in finance and accounting, but what makes him burst out in excitement is seeing his art pieces come alive.
Piece of timber that has been used for the dress and what has been used for the skin or for the handbag, it's different.
His passion for it is palpable as he shares his art journey with us when we visit him in Gatitu Nyeri, where he works with his partner Stanley Michuki. Together they use locally available materials, and once they start from scratch, there is no stopping them in their quest to produce masterpieces which they later sell to hotels, business places in Nyeri, and interested individual buyers who appreciate art within and beyond the borders of Nyeri County. In a society that does not quite appreciate art, and one that is perceived as very academic-oriented, Benson says it has not been an easy journey. Most parents would rather their children did not dwell so much in it, an activity some even perceive as time-wasting. That, in part, rings true for him as well.
All dreams are valid.
When he initially expressed his interest to pursue art to his father,
Back then, I kept on saying that I would like to do this for a longer period. I would like to do art for to nurture the talent. I tried to draw some things in the house, and he'd tell me, my father would tell me that, what are you doing? Why don't you look at your books?
He says that has, however, changed with time as his father now appreciates that his son is truly gifted.
I've given him a couple of pieces. I remember there was a piece that I gave him that I had dedicated, "Thank you, Dad," and he actually really loved it. Today when I go home, I actually always see it. He puts it in a very prime place. I know he sees it every day. So today I'm sure, I know he loves,
He encourages you now?
Yeah, he encourages me. He keeps encouraging me.
Unauza pesa ngapi?
Okay. Sasa kama hii, ile mturoko, unanunua kitu ka 3,500.
Kama hii ni pesa ngapi?
Sasa kama hii ni ya 2,500.
Becky Njogu has been an educationist for over 30 years. A former head teacher at Mount Kenya Academy in Nyeri, now retired. She strongly believes in art so much that she now runs the Kijani Kibichi Art Club to encourage young talents.
The creativity that even artists have, the ones who make money with it, because there are lots of them. Design is... Yeah, you can, because design doesn't necessarily mean the children who designed, they started with art.
Art, yes.
Art makes money, for sure.
No regrets, never. We are doing this all the way, yeah.
Eat, breathe, dream, art.
Yes, eat, breathe, dream, do everything. I would even want my sons to come into this and get something they can do from the same. Yeah, so it's no regrets and no turning back. No turning back. When you decide you want to do something, I once remember I said that Martin Luther once said that if you can't walk, or if you don't have to see the whole staircase, just take the first step. That's faith.
There are talents that can be explored, and one actually makes a living out of these talents and gifts. And perhaps a word of encouragement to those who did not perform as well as they had hoped. It is not the end of life. Discover the talent that is within you, that you harbor within yourself, and perhaps with that you can actually make something of your life, even art such as this. Carol Derry, KTN News, Nyeri County.
All right, so on social media tonight, we're asking you whether you think the Attorney General has steered the government effectively in legal matters in 2016. Your comments continuing to come through even as we await that conversation. Awar Ondeng says, Given Muigai has failed the government, there's a document called a CBA which he refuses to advise the government about. Keep your thoughts coming in right here on Checkpoint. We'll be right back. Checkpoint. Welcome back to Checkpoint, this very first episode for the year 2017. And tonight, my guest is somebody I spoke to a little earlier, Professor Githu Muigai, who's Kenya's Attorney General. We spoke about a wide range of issues. That motion to be tabled by Majority Leader Aden Duale on the conduct of Justice Odunga, the amendments to the electoral law, and whether 2017 will be the year we finally see the implementation of the two-thirds gender rule. Also, remember that sticky matter of PS Karanja Kibicho and that sentence, jailing him for contempt of court? How about Cabinet Secretary Nkaiseri? There's a warrant of arrest out for him. Is there selective application of justice? My conversation now with Attorney General Professor Githu Muigai. All right, thank you very much, Professor Muigai, for speaking with us on KTN. I think we want to start off by taking a look at some of the big things that have happened in the legal fraternity. And I think the one that people will remember at this point is what happened in the National Assembly with the passing of the amendments to the electoral law. A lot of people decried that atmosphere in which that was done, the way it was done. What are your thoughts on what took place in the National Assembly?
Well, I think that we are having some teething problems as our democracy settles down. In an ideal situation, the House should conduct itself with greater decorum, obviously, with greater order. The Speaker should have greater control of the procedure. So one cannot say that that is the ideal way that the House should operate. Having said that, however, I assume it is possible to say that the will of the majority was recorded in the manner that the standing orders provide. And that those questions are now before other forums for resolution.
But then they talked about the way in which the amendments were passed, that the amendment to the initial law itself came from a bipartisan approach with a joint parliamentary select committee, and that if any changes were to be made to that specific law, that it should have been subject to more consultation. Some saying the majority side was sort of bullying its way with passing that law. Do you agree? Because there was also the question about extending the term of the Joint Parliamentary Select Committee or finding a different sort of body to midwife that process.
Well, as you will recall, when that process commenced a couple of months ago, I was invited by Parliament to talk to them about my own thinking of where we were in terms of the impasse around IEBC. And I advised in broad terms that if the worst came to the worst, we would have to let the commissioners go and we would have to rethink questions about timelines and so on and so forth. And much of what I told the committee was taken on board. But when they went to the drafting part, they did not call on my expertise, or rather the expertise of my officers. They did it on their own. So essentially it was a parliamentary initiative. In fact, I was shocked to read in the paper some politicians attacking me for failure to advise that the law should have been in one way as opposed to the other, when everybody who cared to follow the process remembers that it was wholly and exclusively a political process centered in Parliament. Indeed, the politicians themselves agreed not to make any alterations whatsoever. To the extent that now, on second thoughts, they seem to think that they didn't quite capture the essence of what they wanted. I think it is legitimate to reopen the question. Now, the direction that will go, I do not know. I have been summoned by the Senate on the Tuesday, and I intend to go and give them the benefit of my experience.
All right. Do you think, in hindsight, it should have been subjected to debate? I know both principals from Jubilee and CORD urged their members in the National Assembly to pass the amendments with changing not so much as a comma or a full stop. And we know and understand the process of lawmaking. In hindsight,
To the extent, the reason we first went to Parliament to look into this question was because we wanted to prepare ourselves for free, fair, peaceful elections. To that extent, that spirit must be retained, because we do not want anything that can poison the electoral process. To my mind, the direction Senate is going is a good direction, because it's a direction that says, let us reason together, all of us, and see where we can give and take, so that this ceases to be the issue, and the issue becomes building IEBC, capacitating it, getting it to procure what it needs, and revisiting the voter register and making sure we are ready.
Professor, there have been some people that have said we cannot possibly be ready in time. My question to you is there any window in the law that would allow the election to be postponed, or do we just say, you know, do or die, it's August, whether we can get this ready or not?
We must do everything humanly possible to do the election within the constitutionally mandated time. However, should a big if for some reason we are not ready, then it is better, in my judgment, to postpone the election within the limits of the law, other than have a deeply flawed election that can lead to instability of a nature that none of us want to see.
What would that provision in law be as you advise the country right now? And like we said, it's a big if, and we're seeing efforts being made to make sure that we are ready in time. But should we get to a decision like that, what would that window in law be to allow the election to be postponed from August?
There have been initiatives in the past that I'm aware of in Parliament. There have been bills that have sought to change the voting date from August to December. I believe that bill was defeated once. I don't know whether it was shelved or I don't. That is one way of going about it. That is to change the election date itself for all time. From
that would require a referendum, though.
It would require some initiatives, but I'm not sure that at the moment anybody is willing to open that window. And then, of course, there is another simpler route, which says that Parliament by a resolution can extend its own life if Kenya is at war, etc., etc. Now, we would have to rethink very seriously around all these issues. For now, I don't want to be the one to suggest that we should open the book on those at the moment. I want to remain with the theme, the message that let's capacitate IEBC, let's work day and night, let's procure, let's audit the register, let's register new voters for the last time, let's print ballots and get ready.
Okay. Let's talk about the IEBC now for a moment, because we know the president has picked Wafula Chebukati for this. And now the question of regional balance, which is enshrined in our constitution, comes up saying, should Parliament vet him and he gets the final appointment, then both he, head of the commission, and the head of the secretariat would come from one region. And we've spoken to a number of actors in civil society who think that perhaps we take this question of regional balance a bit too far.
I agree entirely. I think we overdo it. The spirit of the Constitution is that we shouldn't have an over-concentration of individuals from the same religion, the same ethnicity, the same geography, etc., etc. But the idea is not that you get two good people who can do a good job, and then you have to you have to go and look for some other less qualified person to achieve an ethnic balance. So I wouldn't spend a sleepless night on this myself.
Okay, so
and I agree with civil society if that is their position.
All right, okay. They will be happy to hear that. Let's talk about what happened outside the National Assembly after the amendments were passed, and the statement from the Majority Leader Aden worried a lot of Kenyans, and it was a very direct attack against a member of the judiciary, claiming bias on the basis of tribe with some of his rulings, and in respect to that ruling regarding that special sitting that was there. And some saying, including the LSK and the Chief Justice himself, saying this was uncalled for, this was intimidation. What's your reaction to that statement by the Majority Leader?
I think that first and foremost, we must recognize that free speech is an important part of our democracy. And in recent years, we've seen a lot of free speech that is also extremely robust. Having said that, I must say that the integrity of the judiciary is absolutely critical to the well-being of a democracy. The judges are not elected. They have no forum to answer back. Obviously, the judges are professionals. They are human beings. They are subject to error. But the manner in which a judge can be criticized for his work is very well laid out. And it is inappropriate. It is inappropriate that a judge should be the subject of political commentary in forums that he cannot. And that is not to say that judges are immune from criticism. In fact, we lawyers spend all our lives trying to explain to a higher court why the other judge was wrong.
Right. So there's an appellate process.
Yes. Why he didn't understand the law, or why he was biased or something. Yeah. So we attack judges every day. But the decorum and the dignity and the process for doing that must be retained. Because if we begin to attack judges in a very violently political fashion, we will not be able to respect the outcome of that. So if we hold an election, if the Supreme Court says X has been elected and not Y, it means then that we can disregard the judgment because we can attack the judgment politically. So my own caution to all politicians, and there are many, is that we have to allow the judicial process a dignified existence. And even where we disagree, and we are entitled to disagree, we must moderate the language we use to address judges.
Because you mentioned an appellate process, but there's also the JSC to which any individual can go to if they're unhappy with the conduct of a judge. But then we hear that there's a motion that's going to be tabled in Parliament to discuss Justice Odunga, and it's going to be moved by a majority.
A judge. It is very, very, very rare in a democracy that is invoked. I therefore feel that it cannot be said that Honorable Duale has no right to do that. Maybe one can ask whether there are other ways of expressing this discontent in a manner that continues to protect Parliament and continues to protect the dignity of the judges and of the court. And
what would a motion in Parliament, though, achieve?
Well, it would be a form of censure, I assume.
Yeah. And what would that lead to?
In fact, legally speaking, it not much, because you cannot remove a judge because you have a parliamentary motion. You can remove a judge if you have a process through the JSC and then to the tribunal, to the president. So other than probably making the political point that there are people who are dissatisfied with the work of a particular judge, it doesn't achieve much, and may set a very, very I'm looking for the right word, may set a precedent that may be inappropriate.
Okay. I'd like us to talk about something else that has plagued the country the entire year, because we're at the end of 2016, and yet again, the two-thirds gender principle remains unimplemented, unresolved, and some say this falls directly at your doorstep.
And I can tell you, nobody, and I mean nobody, has done more for this process. You recall towards 2012, when we were going into the last election, I personally got very worried that we could end up with a parliament that could be declared by the court to be illegitimate. Right. And I went to the Supreme Court and I said, please guide us on this law. And the Supreme Court, with a majority, the Willie Mutunga Chief Justice dissenting, said you can implement this slowly, and we give you up to 2015 to do it. I set up a task force, and they went halfway around the world. They came back with all manner of proposals. We drafted a bill. President approved that bill. We negotiated it with the Women Caucus in Parliament. They approved it. We went to Parliament. It was defeated. It was defeated. I didn't give up. We started another round of negotiations. We tinkered a little bit with that bill that became the Duale bill. Again, we went with it to the House. It was defeated. Senator Sijeni got her own bill. We got behind her. We supported it. It went to the Senate. Just this week, Christmas week, it was defeated. Now, I have myself written to both speakers very, very strongly worded opinions saying I entertain the gravest possible doubt that we would withstand a constitutional challenge in 2018. Just when I had dispatched the letters to the speakers, we got this judgment from the High Court saying that even cabinet itself has to be re-examined.
Right.
So I come from the school of thought that believes we need to do something about the two-thirds gender rule.
And what is that? Because you've talked about all of these efforts that have been put in place. What is the challenge with implementing this?
The challenge is getting the numbers. There aren't enough people in the House who are convinced that this is a problem. In fact, I have met many people who've told me...
Even though it's in our constitution.
Yeah, I've met many people who keep telling me, you are the one who is creating a problem where none exists. We are all happy. There's no problem. Parliament will exist with or without two-thirds.
How about putting in place a regulatory framework to bind all political parties towards this issue?
We've tried that. I can tell you we've tried everything. Now, political parties don't want to be thrown this problem because then they would have themselves to pick the women in their constituencies. Now, they want to pick the candidate who is most popular so that they can win. They want numbers. So they don't want the process of implementation of the two-thirds to be their problem.
Some say in an area where you've got a sphere of influences and the advice that you give to the president in how he constituted his cabinet and that to be in line with the two-thirds gender rule. There had been complaints about it after the reshuffle. Persons went to court. We've now seen what happened in the court, and even that judgment suspending it for 8 months, which then sort of says it allows this illegality to prevail. But what advice did you give the president with respect to...
It's very sensible when a court warns itself of the danger of creating a constitutional crisis in the middle of other problems. So to the extent that the judge says we suspend this for whatever, I agree with that entirely.
So do we remain with an illegality, Professor?
Well, you see, there are... This whole question, by the way, is an old question. We litigated whether the Supreme Court itself is properly constituted. You recall, and then we were advised that since we can't have half a woman, half a man, it was okay. The reason the government, the reason the president makes decisions, his deputy makes decisions, cabinet makes decisions, there are numerous reasons. And on the whole, all we have to keep advising is whether this is consistent with the law. Now, we ourselves have a certain view of the law, and the court on a number of occasions says, no, the government's view of the law.
And what is your view of the law with respect to the constitution of the cabinet?
I took the view myself up to this point in time that that the judge has made a different interpretation that cabinet was safe. Now we are studying the judgment. We will, when cabinet resumes, we will discuss it, debate it, and then it will become part of the bigger discussion about 2/3.
All right. So, just to understand, the cabinet is not constituted based on the 2/3 gender principle.
Right now.
Is it?
As far as we're concerned, it is. As far as the court is concerned, we are not.
Okay.
So we have to now, at an appropriate forum, debate what the court has said. And in any event, since it is applicable in the next cabinet, we put in place, if we agree with the court, we put in place the necessary instrument. If we do not, we go to a higher court and say there is a misapprehension as to what this means.
All right, so there's a possibility of it.
That's a possibility.
Okay. Let's also talk about then a number of incidents with respect to respect for the law
that we have seen this year. Arrest warrants out for Cabinet Secretary Joseph Kaiseri, Monica Juma, when she was at the Ministry of Interior regarding, that ship that was blown up in the high seas. There is that, and there's also the PS, Karanja Kibicho, who is to be jailed for contempt of court. This has not happened. They are still walking free. And some say that the government itself is unable to respect the rule of law and to carry this process out. Do you think this sets a bad precedent? Why should anybody else obey the law when the government does not do so?
Clear. I want to make this absolutely clear. A court of law that purports to issue an arrest warrant in order to enforce a debt is acting contrary to law. There is binding precedent from the Court of Appeal where the Court of Appeal has said you cannot do that. That is illegal. Now, when you say to a permanent secretary, we want you to pay Mr. X 1 billion shillings because a judgment was rendered in his favor 5 years ago, and where the response is, we need budget. And then the response becomes, that is a way of hiding from your obligation. The courts that have done that contrary to law. I have spoken at Judges and Magistrates Forum on this point many times, and I have spoken to the Chief Justice in the Judicial Service Commission, and I have said we are seeing a harassment of public officials contrary to law. But now we've gone further. I took to Parliament the Contempt of Court Bill. It has now become law. It is the Contempt of Court Act 2016. And there we specifically provide, and I drafted the provision myself, that no court of law shall issue a contempt order in respect of a payment of a debt owed by government directed against an accounting officer.
So what happens to those who are seeking justice? In this case, in this particular case, this individual who has been seeking justice in the courts for 5 years or more, what happens to him? Because you're talking about the Contempt of Court Act, but what about those people who get into a situation where they're wronged by government, and it's one individual going up against, to be very fair, Professor Githu Muigai and a host of other government officials?
Okay. What is to happen if we were to arrest Dr. Kibicho because he owes Mr. Hussein, or rather the ministry owes Mr. Hussein 1 million? So we send him to industrial area prison. But then what do we do with the money he owes Mr. Ali? He comes out, we put him back. So
wouldn't that compel the government to make its payment as per the law, as per the ruling?
The reason government is working on a process of processing debt owed to the public is precisely this. We want to have a payment system that is professionally managed, okay? And we pay claims in accordance with their age and so on. And part of it is to beat corruption. because there are cartels, I'll be the first to admit, specializing in collecting checks from ministries. If you are owed money by ministries, they have.
But wouldn't you want to deal with that on a case-by-case basis, Professor? If one individual has to wait 5 years for a judgment like this to be enforced, where's the justice for those individuals who are going up against government? Fair enough, there could be cartels, but not everyone seeking justice from government agencies, is out to get you.
I grant that. Well, I think that the legitimate question that you raise is that government ought to be setting up a process of paying its debts that is open, that is transparent, that is well funded annually, so that the Minister of the Treasury is able to say in his budget, this year we have put aside 50 billion to deal with historical claims pending against the government. I have been in favor of that. We have had very good discussions at cabinet level about that, and I think it's something that would definitely happen in 2017.
All right, that's in respect to a debt. But for the Cabinet Secretary in Kayseri, it's about another matter altogether, about going against a court injunction, blowing up a ship that would, some say was part of evidence in a court proceeding. That is a different matter altogether. And then you have the members of the Doctors' Union who are up for a contempt of case court. Correct me if I'm wrong, fairly similar, going against a court ruling. Then some say if that arrest warrant cannot be effected against a cabinet secretary, surely it shouldn't be effected against anybody else in a similar circumstance.
Ideally, we should have all court orders having the same force of law. And we should have all court orders enforced in the procedures set out in the law. Unfortunately, the court orders emanate from different types of proceedings. There are court orders in divorce matters, there are court orders in civil matters, there are court orders in the criminal process, and so on. And I must be one who would accept that we ought to do more to ensure. And one of the discussions I've had with the Chief Justice is for us to bring back the bailiff system. And the bailiff system was a system where the court had its own enforcement officers. So if you have a court order, you don't have to go and look for the local police station. You have the bailiffs who are able to enforce the order.
Right, but with respect to this one, though, you're talking about a bailiff. This is a cabinet secretary who's in charge of interior. We see him at various press conferences and at various events with the person who is in charge, ideally, of enforcing that. He and the Inspector General of Police.
That's where the arrest should take place.
Well, no, I'm just asking because in terms of optics for the nation, they're saying, but we see these two together. What would be so difficult in enforcing that specific arrest warrant?
In most of these cases, by the way, we normally intervene with the court as soon as such an order is made by way of a follow-up application. Seeking to give an explanation. And 9 out of 10, actually, courts listen to this and they vary the orders or set them aside. However, I want to concede this. We do justice to the rule of law if we enforce court orders expeditiously and in respect of all persons. And that's an ideal that we must continue working.
So will we see the cabinet secretary get arrested anytime soon?
I would hope that we will not need to arrest any cabinet secretary because they will be obeying the law and doing what the law says.
Because it does. Don't you think that certain senior people are untouchable because they're a cabinet secretary?
That's not the message.
What do you think?
That's not intended to be the message.
However, don't you think?
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Speaking on behalf of Kenyans.
I can tell you that's not government policy.
Okay.
Government policy is that we must enforce court orders.
All right.
And we must enforce them across
All
the
right. Against all persons, big or small,
Against all
everyone in
persons
between.
subject to the law.
Subject to the
Yeah.
law. Subject to
There are many persons with immunities but that's not what we want to discuss now.
Yeah, that's a conversation for another day. It is indeed. As we close, Professor, where do you see us going with, in 2017, there's an election coming up. There's so many laws that are in the air. And there seems to be a lot of disquiet in the country. With respect to the laws that we have, the ones we're trying to change, the ways in which we're trying to change them, and with all that we have discussed, what assurances are there that, one, the law shall prevail, that the advice that your office will give to the head of state will be sound to guide us through what is a politically polarized environment over the next few months?
This is a very vibrant democracy. Even you would be the first to admit that. It's an extremely vibrant democracy. I think our people are probably the most articulate on this continent about politics. They know what they want. They say it loudly. They say it on social media. They say it in public meetings. I never fear for this country on the basis that that the gains we have made can be reversed. They are irreversible. All around us, countries are talking about extending presidential terms. Have you ever heard any Kenyan raising that issue? It is completely behind us, and it will never come back again. Now, 2/3. Everybody is in agreement. It's about implementation. Nobody in Kenya can say, this body constituted wholly of men is okay, let it continue its business. No. We have made such gains that are irreversible. This doesn't suggest that we don't have problems. Of course we have several problems. Immediate problem is to stabilize politics, so that politics does not affect the major transformations we are making in the economy, in education. I think in education we are doing very well. In agriculture.
From a legal standpoint, how would we stabilize our politics? What are some of the laws that we can have in place to make sure that we are where we are? And maybe you can just speak about that.
Politics can only be stabilized by politics. Law guides. I am in favor of, and like now we've just brought in a whole new corpus of laws around corruption. We even have a new bribery act. We have a whistleblower protection act, and so on and so forth. These are good things. They are good initiatives. But ultimately, it is the politics that makes it possible for these laws to be applied firmly, decisively, expeditiously. The minute you arrest a governor or some politician, and there is a whole demonstration by villagers and others coming to say, why have you touched our man? This is the politicization of corruption is probably the worst impediment we have in the fight against corruption.
Wouldn't it be stopped by the law being seen to be done, going beyond arrests and actually having convictions, these so-called big fish, and frying them?
And that's exactly what we're doing. I'm the chairman of the MAT, the Multi-Agency Task Force, and we meet every 2 weeks, precisely to do this. Mr. Investigator, how far have you gone? How much more time do you need? Mr. Prosecutor, why have you kept the file since you got it? And so on and so forth. We ask ourselves questions about this, and it's working. The machine is beginning to move. And you can see, just this Christmas, people are still being charged. We went and opened the anti-corruption court the other day with the Chief Justice. We committed to a new set of rules and how to expedite it. But no sooner did we get that done than the following day, there were people in court saying those rules should be, and a petition in the ISC saying the Chief Justice should be. So, we know our country, we know our problems, but all this notwithstanding, we must soldier on because I think we are on the right path.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you for your time.
All right, so that conversation with Professor Githu Muigai. Our poll is still ongoing on social media, on Twitter. We're asking, do you think AG Githu Muigai steered the government effectively in legal matters in 2016? Were you satisfied with his responses to a number of my questions? Keep your thoughts coming in at KTN News, at Yvonne Okwara. The hashtag is Checkpoint. Don't go anywhere. I'll be sampling your views and giving you that poll result in just a short while. But also coming up, we've got the number for you and want to take you down memory lane 8 years ago to tell you about an important event that was happening that we must always remember. You're watching Checkpoint. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to Checkpoint. On the number tonight, we want to take a look at the just released KCSE results. Much fuss has been made about the fact that we have reduced numbers of A's, about girls doing better than boys. But there's also the side of it that we have not taken a look at. And this is the high number of students that got such low grades. So take a look at these numbers. 149,929 students scored a D- in the 2016 examination for secondary school students. Now, this is a huge number. Remember, those that sat for the exam were over 577,000. Now, if you take a look at those that scored an E, which in our education system is a fail, 33,399 scoring an E in 2016. Put these two numbers together and the number looks even bigger tonight. Let's get that. I think it's what, 140,000 of them getting, all of them not being able to qualify for university. That is that figure right there. Sorry, my bad. It's 183,328. This is the total number that will not qualify for university. Now, put this number in perspective. 183,000 out of 577,000. That's about a third of those that sat for the examination will not qualify to university. And for a good number of them in our education system, this becomes the end of their journey through the academic circles in our country. It raises a number of issues. While we're all lauding the Cabinet Secretary for cleaning up the system, but it really does start to say something. This grade, this E grade, this D grade, what does that mean? Is that the end of life? Are we all just basing our lives on that one academic grade? What about those who are gifted differently? What does that grade D, grade E say about them? Remember, there were days when people would move on to polytechnics, many of which have now been converted to universities offering degrees. That middle-level skill is going missing, and that is what we're hoping we will see out of the curriculum review process that is ongoing. That 2663, that it's not just about that grade that determines your life, but rather the wholesome look at the individual. So this is a sad state of affairs, even as we're celebrating what Cabinet Secretary Matiang'i has done, but we really need to look into our education system that looks at more than just a grade. This is your number for this very first week of 2017. All right, so it is the first day of January 2017, and I want to take you down memory lane. In case you may have forgotten, on this day, 8 years ago, we were in a crisis. Violence had broken out in various parts of the country after the announcement of the election results. Some said it was spontaneous, others said it was meticulously planned. Whatever the case, the country was almost tipping over the precipice. What followed was chants of "don't be vague, go to The Hague," and the secret list in Waki's envelope kept the country on edge. It was finally handed over to Kofi Annan and The Hague. Mr. Ocampo became a frequent visitor in the country, and finally charges were brought on 6 individuals. The numbers were whittled down to just 2. They are now at the helm of this country, their cases having been dismissed at The Hague. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we are on the verge of another election. Some events pre-election are already cause for worry in the country. The proverbial drumbeats of war are sounding, according to, remember, the former Chief Justice, Willie Mutunga. A number of contentious issues just months to the election. Have we forgotten so quickly the events of this time 8 years ago? Lest we forget, over 1,000 people died, 100,000 more displaced. The country was never the same. On this day, may we never forget the events of this time, 8 years ago. Ponder on that, food for thought. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back. The day's sports news up next. All right, so on our question tonight on Checkpoint, we had asked you whether you think AG Professor Githu Muigai has steered the government well in legal matters in the year 2016. The results are in. 62% of you say no, 21% say yes, and 10% of you 50-50. All right, here's one. Anthony Gikabia says AG Muigai knows the law well for the 2/3 rule. Parliament and Senate are to blame for the impasse. They shot down the bills. Mutembe Wankone from Meru, thank you for watching. You say the AG is doing his best and I find him fit too. Albert Motari, you say he was very active in the cases of ICC, then relaxed. John Kanye says, let's see if doctors and leaders will be jailed this week. Then we'll know courts and police are really independent. Namaro Wekesa, bringing issues from past years. Okay, he convinced GOK to pay billions in Anglo leasing and refused to acknowledge the CBA for hardworking doctors. Honorable Jeanette Mohammed says that was a good interview, but on electoral laws, the AG was speaking from both sides of the mouth. All right. Kevin Owor Oma, you say no because the government has in most cases acted as if there is no legal advisor. Dennis Ayoyi, yes, the AG did a good job in adjudicating of government legal matters. The AG has defended Kenya in international headquarters. Ahmed Abdi finally says, sad to see the AG is not involved in some very important legal matters in the government. Those are your views. Thank you very much. The conversation continues. It never stops. The hashtag is Checkpoint. Keep them coming in. Now, ordinarily, at a time like this, I would give you my take, but it's the start of the year. So I want to do things a little differently. My take will return next Sunday, but I want to leave you now with something interesting here. Now, you know us as KTN News anchors and reporters. What you may not know is that some of us are not too shabby when it comes to shaking a leg or even belting out a fancy tune. Well, my colleague Stanley Mbichu captured some of these precious moments on camera, and tonight he shares them with you. I leave you with that. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole, and our sign language interpreter was Maresha Owiti. Have a good night and a great year. Watch us goof while you're at it. Good night.
For another year running in the profession of news reporting, some of KTN's best reporters are caught in camera lenses, haunted by their worst nightmare, the goof monster. On behalf of all the camera crew and the KTN family, this is KTN's News Files.
Njiandali nandeli la, njiandali nandeli.
The government have made it clear that adequate measures have been put in place.
Matambo ni mwongo, unawadanganya watazamaji aje.
Kwa hisi shuka chini.
Unadanganya watazamaji vipi?
Nitakusukuka.
Friday tukikosa guest. Napiga tu show wenyewe.
This year's edition of the classic Safari Rally that is scheduled for 12 to 10.
Nasema nini man? From 12 to 10.
Kilele cha maadhimisho haya ni auction inaitwa nini?
Yesterday, it was an important 1-0 victory against South Africa, while Cameroon on the other side secured also an important victory against Ghana.
Then medanganya.
Watu wetu rongo. Watu wetu wote. Watu wetu rongo.
Nasikia kulala.
Kulala.
Oh my God.
Aish. $1 billion question.
boldly. Enango yawa. Enango. Kidonolo.
Deputy Governor of Machakos County, Alfred Mutua. Huh? Oh, okay. Thank you, Governor of Machakos.
Sound ya leo ilikuwa perfect. Paka ukasikia mzaini kama anatweng. My government. Mimi na waelezea ya kwamba serikali yangu.
Indeed, the narrative coming out of the Youth Enterprise Fund in the last. Indeed, the narrative coming out of the youth. Indeed.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here. Get out of here, man.
Iwapo sheria hizi zitatekelezwa.
Huku wa Kenya wakiweka matumaini yao kwa sasuzika za nasema bwana.
On whether Kenya has asked for an extension of the
However,
the bicycles not only keep the men away, they help them stay in school. Mashirima Kapombe.
This year's edition of the classic safari rally that is scheduled for 12 to 10. Nasema nini man? From 12 to 10.
Inadaiwa kwamba maambukizi ya juu. Kai, maji yanaingia. Ni vibaya? Oh, sawa. Kwanzia wimbo uliompa umaarufu.
Manake sisi hapa tuko sawa. Emily chapchumba lina yomune mama. Emily chapchumba lokani mboge yomune mama. Yomuno tuli.
Yaani siku yangu imekwisha nikiwa tu hapa juu ya loop kwa sababu ya KTN inaitwa Morning Express. Twende kasi na ngojea tumalize.
Stanley Mbichu, KTN News.